Hey, Tennessee, this is Irene the Realtor, and today I'm here with Brian Smith. Brian is a mortgage lender with Mortgage Investors Group. Hey, Brian,
Hey Irene, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Brian, I just want you to tell us all you can in a few minutes about the interest rate. But first, I want you to tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate you having me on. I have been in the mortgage business since 2003, so 21 years. I went to UT Knoxville, graduated with a degree in finance. I worked in retail banking for a while in Knoxville and also here in Nashville, and then got into the mortgage business. It's sort of a nice fit because with my degree. Although you don't have to have a degree at all to do what I do. But I do love numbers, and I love helping people uh, get into the home of their dreams, and kind of take part of the American dream, as they say. But Yeah, I've been working with Mortgage Investors Group since September of 2019, which is interesting because people in our industry change companies fairly frequently. So to be with a company that long says a lot. And I think, our company's based in Knoxville, so it's almost locally owned. And many of the people that work with me have been with the company 10, 15, even 20 years. The company started back in 1989. Um, so there's something to be said for longevity at a company. They obviously treat their employees very well. And one of the main reasons I came to this company, I mean, probably the very top reason I came to this company is because of interest rates, which is the topic of our conversation. We have been extremely competitive in terms of having lower rates. The previous companies I worked with, they had okay rates, but they were nothing to write home about. Um, and so that's been one of the focuses of our organization over the years, is to make sure that we provide our customers with the most competitive rates, so they don't really feel like they have to shop around, although some still do, but they usually come back to us.
Yes.
Um, but that's very important. Interest rates control the payment, and uh, to a large degree, and it can make or break it for some folks, right? But that's sort of my summary. I don't know if you wanted to talk about anything else outside of that, but
Oh, no, no. Thank you so much. That gives us an idea of how long you've been doing this. And so we
yeah,
know that you're very knowledgeable. So I've
mhm,
got a few questions. And
sure.
the first question I want to ask you is what happened? What happened to that low interest rate that we saw a few years ago? Why is it so high?
Yeah, and let me do this. That's a great question. I'm going to try to share my screen, and I
Okay.
apologize to you and anyone else if this doesn't go the way I hope. Okay, it says my
Oh, I think,
screen.
let's see. Brian, I
And
have to make you a host.
oh,
So
okay.
I'm gonna be challenged now with
That's okay. You know what? We don't have to do that. That's totally fine. What I was going to
I've got it
do is,
right now, Brian. Can you see where it's telling you you're the host now?
oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Awesome. Let's see if I can find the particular. Here we go. Can you see that? There's like these squiggly lines.
I can't see anything.
Okay. Um, well, this is part and parcel with doing live Zoom video. Let's
Right,
see.
right. That's
Can you
okay. Yeah.
can,
People
can you
understand. Yes.
can you see this now?
Oh,
This,
yes, yes, I
okay.
can see it.
So this is a chart from the Federal Reserve website, and it says 30-year fixed rate mortgage average in the United States, and it goes all the way back. I don't know if it goes all the way back to like 1971, and you can see there was a huge run up in up to 1980,
Yes.
starting about right here in 1978, and then it kind of came down, but then it peaked in 1981. And then after 1981, you can see this general downtrend that
Yes.
pretty much went all the way down with a little hiccups here and there. It doesn't go in a straight
Yeah.
line, but goes all the way down to uh, the end of 2021. That's when rates started going up.
Okay.
So you basically had 40 years of overall declining interest rates. And sorry. And then you can see rates just started to shoot up here in early 22, just a little over 2 years ago.
Yes.
Well, so you can see like right here where my cursor is, it's showing May 9th, 7.09%. So these are just average rates. These are not my company's rates. This is just a good overall average rate. So if you
Okay.
go back to about 2001, the rates were about the same. They're right around that 7% mark. So historically speaking, rates are not that terrible. However, as you can see, when you're coming down or coming off these bottoms here, when rates were in the twos and threes for several,
Yes.
months and maybe a couple years, everything's relative to that. So 7% does seem awful compared to that, but historically, it's really kind of average. The problem, though, is we're all aware, and you and I are particularly aware, is that we've seen these rates shoot up since early 2022
Yes.
without a corresponding decrease in home prices. So it's a double whammy.
Exactly.
So I get so tired of people saying, well, I had a 15% rate back in early 80s. It's usually somebody in their 70s or something. And I'm
Right.
like, no, that's great, but home prices were, 30, 40, $50,000. You know, unfortunately, in today's economy, you didn't normally when rates go up, asset values come down to offset it. That's not happening in housing because of the supply and demand imbalance. There's too many buyers and too few sellers, too few homes to match the number of household formations that are going on. And so that's why we're seeing sustained high rates, or a good reason why. And then also because when the Federal Reserve, when we had COVID, so that would have been really early 2020, so March. So you can see rates are about 3.36 there, but that wasn't the bottom. The reason why rates had been low for so long is because and I'm going all the way back to 2008,
Okay.
when we had the last financial housing crisis. We came out of that in 2009, 2010. Well, the Fed did something called quantitative easing, and that's fancy talk for basically they just manipulated the market to force rates in general down. And that included mortgage rates, not just mortgage rates, but rates in general. That would include treasury rates, like treasury bonds and stuff like that. And they did that to keep the economy going because we were coming out of a severe financial, not a depression, but a very severe recession back in this gray area, which shows the last big recession we had. And so they kept doing that and goosing the market, so to speak, to artificially keep rates low into the fours, into the threes, like you see here. And then once COVID hit, they went on steroids and they really goosed the market because they're like, oh shoot, people can't even get out of their house.
Mm-hmm.
This economy is going to go into the toilet. We've got to do something. So you remember they eventually sent checks to households. They had those
Yes.
PPP loans to businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Money was just flowing everywhere. So you had this huge amount of money creation, or I say currency creation. And when that happens, you have inflation that really becomes uncontrollable. So inflation is measured by the federal government in different economic reports. There's probably the most popular one is actually coming out tomorrow, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. That's the Fed's one of their favorite measures of inflation, but the market really pays a lot of attention to it. And it looks at year over year inflation increases or decreases, and it looks at month over month inflation increases or decreases. And of course, all we've seen over the last 2 years is increase.
Right.
Although we're starting to finally see the rate of increase slow down quite a bit to the point where we're not quite there yet, but we're getting to the point where inflation, we still have inflation because all that all those price increases are now baked into the cake. In order for prices to start going down, we literally have to have deflation, which is what happened in a severe recession. I'm not certain that's going to happen, but what we're seeing right now is the slowdown of the increase in inflation, if that makes sense. So the rate of inflation is slowing. It's still going up, but not as much. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing rates finally stabilize right here, you know, because last October we literally hit rates close to 8%, which is crazy. And now you can see they've kind of taken a dip and come back up. We don't expect them to go back up here. We think that rates are going to start, you know, coming down. But the main reason, to answer your question, is a long answer to a very short question, is that it's the Fed has manipulated the Federal Reserve. When I say the Fed, and I'll mention them several times probably, the Federal Reserve is an unelected body of individuals that basically control many, many parts of our economy, more so than even the president and Congress. I hate to say it, but they don't get the bad press because nobody really even knows what they do. But they do a lot of things, and I'm not going to go into any detail there with it, but just know that when they start doing things like market manipulation, it has this impact of having a short-term good result, like lowering rates to help people get cheaper loans to buy cars, houses, whatever, to spur the economy on, to keep things going, or pull us out of a recession. So they lower rates to do that, to pull us out of a recession. So we're starting to see slowdown in the economy right now. So I anticipate rates will start coming down again. How low is hard to say.
Okay. That is absolutely good news. And I'm sure people are saying, hooray! Everybody wants to hear that totally. So when you say rates will go down, is there a way to tell for sure if they will? And will we ever see 3% again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So rates are, think of, you know, how stock prices go up and down on a daily basis. Well, even within the day, but daily and then weekly, they'll go up and down. Rates literally can and do the same thing. The reason they do is because a mortgage rate is directly tied to something called a mortgage bond. Most people that aren't in my business don't even know what the heck a mortgage bond is, but it's part of the overall bond market, and bonds trade similarly to stocks. You have the stock market, then you have the bond market. The bond market, believe it or not, is bigger than the stock market. A lot of people don't realize that. As huge as the stock market is, I believe it represents $109 trillion worldwide. The bond market is over 133 million or trillion. So it's big, which is crazy. And mortgage bonds are just a very tiny sliver of that. However, what dictates whether rates go up or down on a given day is literally the supply and demand of these mortgage bonds. You and I track them, but most people don't track them unless they're in economics or, probably the easiest thing for an individual consumer to see. I wonder what rates did today. There's a couple places they can go. They can go to mortgagenewsdaily.com, and every day they tell you what the 30-year fixed rate is, and it kind of gives you a good idea day to day. You can also probably even more easily see, you know, if people look at business news websites or TV like CNBC, Fox Business News, or I think Bloomberg, at the very bottom of the television, you know how they got the stock tickers going across the bottom, and or on the right corner they'll have the S&P and the Dow and the NASDAQ. Sometimes they'll post a 10-year Treasury yield. What that represents is a 10-year U.S. Treasury yield, and that is a bond. It's a type of bond, and it's not a mortgage bond, but it's probably the most followed, most watched bond out there, and it does a pretty good job of tracking what mortgage rates do. So if, say, today the 10-year Treasury yield is at 4.50 and tomorrow it goes up to 4.6, which would be a fairly sizable move, but if it did that, then you could also figure out that, okay, mortgage rates probably went up by 0.10 as well, or 0.10% today. Or if it goes down by that same amount, it's about they're very correlated, I should say.
Okay.
But what impacts mortgage rates, or what makes them go up or down, is inflation expectations, the strength of the economy, and probably a subset of that strength of the economy would be the jobs situation. So our national employment numbers, if they're starting to weaken, for example, and we're starting to see some cracks in that, and that's honestly what the Fed wanted, the Federal Reserve wanted. They wanted to put a chink in the armor of the employment numbers so that there would be that the inflation numbers would start to come down. That's been their main focus for the last 2 years, is to try to get inflation down. And if that means they have to put a chink in the armor of the employment numbers, which are tracked weekly and monthly, then so be it. That's sort of their attitude. And so the reason why we've seen relatively high rates is because the employment numbers have hung in there fairly well, at least the numbers that the federal government tracks. Now, you can talk to your friend down the street or somebody at church or one of your family members that just lost their job. Whatever I'm saying right now doesn't matter to them, because they think the economy's in the tank because they just lost their job.
Right.
But if you look at the broad spectrum of the entire U.S., overall, the jobs numbers have held in there a lot better than you would have thought, with rates having increased so much in the last couple of years. We're probably finally starting to see that start to work, or what I mean by work is the numbers to start getting a little worse. And if the Fed's big fear is that once they start to get worse, they can really slide down fast. They can kind of develop this momentum and this snowball effect really quickly, and they want to make sure they get out in front of that. So if that starts to happen, we're not there yet, but they'll step in and probably start lowering what's called the short-term federal funds rate, which they hope will help prevent things from going off the cliff. But trying to think, so the other thing, the inflation has been the biggest reason why rates have shot up the way they have, because of what the federal government's response to COVID played a large role in that. And now we're trying to work off that excess, if you will. And it's kind of weird. You watch the news and they keep talking about how the jobs are awesome, the stock prices keep going up, but everyday folks like you and me don't think the economy's all that great.
Right.
Prices are high.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Everywhere, gas, food, clothing, you name it. And we don't think the economy's that great, but yet somehow these numbers that the government tracks to determine if they should lower or raise rates seemingly show the economy's still kind of hanging in there okay. It's not great, it's not bad, it's kind of in that mediocre area, but it's starting to turn down a little bit, which will help pull in lower rates. Now, when these lower rates occur, it may be late summer, it may be early fall, maybe late fall, it may not be till 2025. It's so hard to know.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of what drives the timing of that is you have every week you have new economic reports that come out that most average people don't pay a bit of attention to, honestly, because it's boring and it doesn't really necessarily directly impact them. But the bond market and the stock market that we've been talking about look very closely at these economic reports, like the CPI report that came out or comes out tomorrow, like the jobs report that comes out the first Friday of every month, like retail sales results, which is a report that comes out, I think, later this week. So these all are supposedly going to tell us the health of the economy. Is the economy strong, or is it starting to unwind a little bit? A lot of these reports over the last 6 to 12 months have been still showing some economic strength, which then basically tells you that inflation may be here a little longer than we hoped, which means when inflation's higher, mortgage rates tend to stay higher as well. When inflation comes down, and it has, but it still has a lot more work to do, but when inflation starts coming down even more, you'll see mortgage rates continue to come down. We hope and I don't, you may be, we're going to ask this later in the conversation, but we think there's no crystal ball here, but we think that perhaps rates will get back down below 6% in the next 6 to 12 months. More likely that'll happen next year. Things keep getting pushed back. I thought it was going to happen by June or August of this year, but there just seems to be a delay in kind of lower rate, but we still strongly believe they're coming.
Okay, so you did say probably next year. Did I
Yeah,
hear you say
if
next year? Okay.
right, and rates, of course, don't move down in a straight line. Think about
Right.
an escalator versus a, you kind of, well, that's not a good analogy, but rates will go up a little bit and it'll come down a little bit, like
Mhm.
2 steps forward, 3 steps back, or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So, but overall, kind of like this chart we're looking at here,
Yes,
we
yes.
not over a span of decades, but maybe over the next several months, we'll probably, maybe we'll see it come down a little bit and then go back up a little bit and then up a little bit and then come back down. And overall, the trend will be probably down.
Okay, that's
And
good.
yep. Um, where they'll end up, nobody knows. I always tell people it really kind of depends on if we have a recession, how deep is that recession? How bad a recession would it be if we have one? So the worse the recession, the lower rates will go.
Okay.
And they might even touch low fives. Who knows? We can hope. We don't
Oh,
want the
yes.
recession. We just want the low rates.
Right, right.
But
You just
unfortunately, I
want the
think the
stuff.
Fed may have learned its lesson, and it may not goose things like it has and continue to manipulate things so much so to get rates to go back down as low as they were, because they don't want this inflation to kind of pop back up,
Okay,
and have to put that genie back in the bottle again. So, um,
I see. And my next question, so what can home buyers do now? What should they do right now? Because like we said, the double whammy of the interest rate and the home prices, what should they do? What should they be doing right now?
there's every customer situation is a little bit different.
Sure.
Let me make sure I've got my AirPods. I think I just lost one. Can you hear me okay?
You sound, yes, I can hear you really well.
Okay, my AirPod's not working. I'm going to turn up my volume here.
Okay.
Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. I may have lost my AirPods. Anyway, every customer situation is unique, but I can give you some generic things like
Okay.
what can a person do to kind of counterbalance these high rates and these high home prices? There's only so much a person can do. The interest rate is going to be a huge piece of that puzzle. Given the fact that we're not seeing 3 and 4 or even 5% rates right now, there's not going to be a way to get to it's going to be difficult to get $1,000 a month payment, for example, or even $1,500 a month used to honestly get you a $225,000 to $250,000 house. That is not the case anymore because of interest rates.
Right. There's no such thing as a 200, not in Nashville. Not in
Exactly.
Nashville. Yes.
So, and I'm glad that's a great segue, because one of the things I was going to say, a person to sort of counterbalance that could move, further away from the city. Now, not everybody can do that, but if you're in Davidson County and you're looking to buy a house, you may have to, for example, go to Robertson County, North Cheatham County, uh, Wilson County. Trying to think. DeKalb County, Cannon County, Smith County, a lot of the counties that you may
Right.
never even thought about. You
Right.
can find better values, more bang for your buck, as they say, if you're willing to drive. Now, I get that some people just simply can't do that for one reason or another, whether it be for family reasons or for their job requires them to be relatively close to their job situation. But that's one thing. Another thing that a person can do, because we've been talking about interest rates, one thing that also impacts rates other than inflation is the actual consumer's credit score. right? So the better your credit score, the lower interest rate you can get. Now, there are certain programs, particularly first-time homebuyer programs, that you can have a 640 credit score or you can have a 780 credit score, and you're going to get the same interest rate, like a THDA, Tennessee Housing Development Agency first-time homebuyer program. What I'm saying about get better rate, get better credit scores will get you a better rate. It does not apply there.
Okay.
If you have at least a 640, you could have an 820 score and you'll get the exact same interest rate on that program. But in general, on a conventional and an FHA loan, especially with conventional, you want to have as high scores as you can. It's probably in the low to mid 700s at least. But to get your credit scores higher, you would do things such as pay down revolving debt like credit card debt, get your balances below 30% of their respective credit limits. If you have nothing but a installment debt or two, whether it be just student loans or maybe a small car loan and you don't have any credit cards, one of the things you can do, ironically, is get a small credit card. Maybe you even have to get a secured credit card with Capital One, MasterCard, for example. For a $99 deposit, they'll give you a $300 credit limit. You can establish or reestablish credit with that type of credit card fairly easily, but you have to, of course, make sure you pay it on time every month and keep that balance below 30% of the credit limit. That will do more for a person's credit than going out and getting 3 or 4 car loans, getting that secured credit card. But you could also, going back to that THDA loan program, that first-time homebuyer program I was telling you about, that program does not allow this, but if a borrower has a cosigner, let's say your friend wants to buy a house, but their debt to income ratios are too high, maybe because the home price is so high, the payment is therefore high, and it makes their debt to income ratio too high. They can add a cosigner. Usually it's best if it's a family member.
Okay.
But that person does not have to live in the house with them, but we can use their income along with the primary borrower's income and get those debt to income ratios down. Now, the trick is finding a person willing to do that. Some people would rather not ask somebody to, hey, be my cosigner, because it's a little bit more than cosigning for a car loan, right?
Yeah.
It's a much larger debt.
Mm-hmm.
It also could impact that cosigner's ability to get their own home mortgage down the way, or get another car, because that could impact their debt ratios for cosigning with their family member. But that's THDA does not allow a non-occupant co-borrower. You have to live in the house with them to be able to be a cosigner on a THDA loan. So I'm really referring to conventional and FHA loans.
Okay. Okay. I see.
And then you want to get out of debt as much as possible. If there's something that you can pay off, I would encourage someone to do it, not to the extent where it leaves $0 in their bank account.
Right.
But getting out of debt is something that you want to do. I was talking about that credit card earlier, what I didn't say, and this is very important, is you want to use that secured credit card for your own benefit. You do not want to carry the balance month over month. You do not want to pay the 25% plus interest on that credit card.
Oh, that's a lot.
You want to pay it in full every month.
Okay.
Use that as a means to an end to get better credit. So when I say get out of debt, it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm really not. You get the credit card to use it as a tool to get your scores up, but not actually carry the debt month after month. You're paying it off monthly. Like where you would normally use a debit card or cash, like at the gas pump, just use it once a month, charge it on the credit card, and then the bill comes, you pay it in full, and then rinse and repeat every month after. But the thing is, a lot of people don't understand or realize is that car loans can be the biggest detractor for getting a mortgage, for example. And car loans, I get it. They're a lot more expensive than they used to be. The interest rates to get these car loans are a lot higher because rates went up. But would you believe, the average car loan payment that I see now is $500, and I've seen $1,200 a month. I've even seen $1,800 a month this past year. Nuts.
gone are the days of seeing 150, 200, 300.
Right.
That used to be the norm 8 to 10 years ago. Now 500 is the norm. Well, guess what? Guess what? If you have a $500 loan, what you could get in terms of mortgage, additional mortgage loan amount in place of that $500 payment. That $500 car payment is equivalent to $75,000 of house. 300 is 45,000 and 100 a month is 15. And so that could keep a person from being able to get that house that they really want, or at least go from living in one county versus another. If they could find a house for another 50 or 75,000, it could be that car note that could be they're kind of holding them back, you know?
Right. So it depends on how much you want to keep that car.
Right. It's really about your
Expensive.
priorities. And I love myself a really nice car, believe me.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you have to pick your poison. Do you want a house, or do you want a nice car? And many times it's mutually exclusive. Many times I'll talk to a client who just a week or two ago went to the car dealerships and bought a new car, a nice one, by the way, with a nice fat payment. And now I can't get them approved because their debt to income ratios are too high.
Right. And it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
before it's,
And
you
so they
know.
have a choice. Do they want to sell their car? Probably not, because they just got it, right? But
Mhm.
you know, it's tough. So that's hopefully that answered the
Yeah,
question.
that was, yes, definitely. You gave us some good ideas there as far as what we can do now and in the future, just so that we could get in a home if the mortgage rates don't go down as low as we would like for them to. Um, and we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you, is there any other information that you would like to share with us that maybe I didn't ask you about?
Yeah, I think some of this, what I'm about to say, kind of goes along with uh, getting out of debt and making sure your credit score is high as possible. A lot of times I'll give advice like to clients. I'll work with a lot of first-time home buyers that maybe have $1,000 or $1,500 in the bank and they want to purchase a home.
Mhm.
I would ask that they really think hard about the timing of their purchase until at least they've saved up more money. Because the last thing you want to do is have a little bit of money in the bank and now you've got this big responsibility of a mortgage payment, but also all the expenses that go along with the home, whether it be, you know, just your utilities, the landscaping, cutting the grass, just all the extra expenses that come with a house. The
Right.
HVAC unit, if it goes out, who's going to pay for it? Not the landlord. The roof, all the big ticket, the hot water heater, all the big ticket items, appliances, etc. You really want to build, and I know it's easier said than done, but it is so important. And it might even mean that you cut out things like simple things like that bottle of Coke you drink, or that Starbucks coffee, or doesn't have to be Starbucks, but I just know they're
Right,
ridiculously
right.
high.
Expensive coffee.
Yeah,
Right.
you know, maybe eat out a couple times less a month. That stuff really adds up, especially as high as everything is nowadays. You know, if that means have a garage sale, sell some stuff that you don't use or need anymore to get some cash, put it in the bank, sell stuff on eBay or Craigslist, whatever.
Right.
Limit gifts at Christmas and birthday, and I know that's going to get some folks in trouble. um, get a side hustle. I know there's so many things you can do
Yeah.
online. And again, I recognize it's yeah, Brian, this is a lot easier said than done. But if you really apply yourself and you really are motivated enough to buy a house and make sure that it's a blessing to you and your family and not a curse, uh, it it is the biggest blessing, one of the biggest blessings you can have, but it can also be an albatross. It can be an anchor. And the worst thing in the world would to be get foreclosed on and have to be booted out of a house. There's nothing worse than that. And you
Right.
want to set yourself up for success. And by, you know, limiting your expenses, saving up as much money as you can, um, you know, and I would even go so far as to say, don't do those buy now, pay later loans. Those things have kind of cropped up over the last year or so, and it's hard to track how many of those are going on, but those will eat you alive. They seem okay at the beginning, but you get hit with penalties and a lot of interest if you don't pay it back by the due date. And so that's sort of a new phenomenon that I've noticed, but um, but yeah, just you want to set yourself up for success, and you know, it's going to take a little bit more, I think, work than it has in years past, mainly because of interest rates and home prices. But you know, there's things you can do, but also we do expect rates to start coming down a little bit, which will help as well.
Okay. Well, and it's very doable. Like you said, you gave some great tips, but and it's not easy, but it is very doable. Well, Brian, we've got about 2 minutes left. How do people contact you if they have more questions or if they want a mortgage loan?
Sure. They can contact me via cell phone at 615-525-8094. I've got an office number, but it just rolls to my cell phone. So that's the best number. And then my email address is brian.smith@MIG Online. I'll spell it. It's BRIAN.SMITH@M as in Mary, G as in girl, online.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Brian, for being with us today.
Yeah,
I
thanks for
really,
having
really
me.
appreciate it. And also, if anyone wants some more information, you can contact me. I'll be happy to give you Brian's information if for some reason you didn't get that. But we will see you next time. Um, I'll
Thanks,
see you
Irene.
next time. Brian, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Irene. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye, everybody.